Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guests today are Peter Bregman and Howie Jacobson. I'll tell you all about them in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that deals with what's often called the soft stuff and easily dismissed. It's the caring, the commitment we exert toward others. And when you do it from a leadership perspective, as both Howie and Peter do, you do it to energize the organization and bring people together for common cause. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you on today.
Such a pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much, John, for having us.
Well, I want to introduce each of you. Peter Bregman is the CEO of Bregman Partners. Wonder where that name came from. Peter coaches, writes, teaches, and speaks mostly about leadership and life. His sweet spot is a strategic thought partner. I like that idea, and I know Peter is highly respected. He's written a bunch of books, including Leading with Emotional Courage, which is really good, and as is 18 Minutes, another great book. Peter, like me and Howie, is a member of Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches. Howie is a PhD, but that doesn't stop him from writing great books accessible to all of us. He is the director of coaching at Bregman Partners and runs the Healthy Minds Initiative. So he, like Peter, has written a whole bunch of books, as well as contributed to Harvard Business Review and many other places. Howie, Peter, honored to have you both on today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great. You write in the book that people change all the time on their own. So why write a book as you can change other people? What's behind that?
There's this truism that is totally not true, that you can't change other people, you can only change yourself. And I've heard it time and time again. And when I think of all of the work that I do as an executive coach, that Howie does as a coach, that you do, John, like everything we're doing is to try to help people change in ways that are positive and productive. So it's like, on the one hand, you have this sort of truism that says you can't change other people. And on the other hand, we're all out there doing our best to help other people change. And there's a disconnect. And I realized, and Howie and I together realized that the disconnect is in how we go about trying to change people. The way that most people try to change others doesn't work. It backfires. It creates resistance to change. So we wanted to sort of, we looked at that and we said, what do we let's share the methodology that we've been using as coaches, that I've been honing for 30 years. Let's share that methodology in a way that anybody can use it, that says, here's what works when you try to change other people.
Great. Howie, do you have a perspective on that change dynamic? So what's the window into getting someone to change his or her mind?
Yeah, well, I think about it in terms of change as a very natural, organic process. So it's not the sort of thing that we have to manufacture out of whole cloth. People are always motivated to do better, to grow. So the question is what's getting in their way when people do get stuck? Because we change, as Peter said, we change all the time. Naturally, but when we lack something or some things, we can get stuck. And those things include ownership. Is it my change, or is somebody else telling me I have to do it, or that there's something wrong with me if I don't?
One of my favorite quotes on change, or at least organizational change, but it has a human, of course it has a human element, is from the great Rosabeth Moss Cantor, who has written oceans of things about change. And she's quoted as once as saying, I hate change. So change is good for you, Peter. Change is good for you, Howie, but not for me. So how do you guys deal with that?
So the way we deal with it, the reason that I like change, but when I can change, right? People resist being changed. They don't resist change. So Rosabeth might not like change, but if we look at her life, she's done a hell of a lot of change. And she's, she hasn't sort of sat on her couch and watched TV all day. She's out there making change, bringing herself to do things. She's writing a ton of books. And and she's not doing it because she hates every minute of it, right? Yeah. So I'm going to sort of challenge her on that view that she hates change. And I'm going to say
I may have misquoted her, but it's a good point of reference.
Yeah, it's a good point of reference. And I think a lot of us say that. And yet, if we look at our lives, we say, but aren't we willing to make those kinds of changes? And the truth is that what we need when we're trying to change is we need support. We need help. We need allies along the way that can kind of bring us through the process. It's not easy. I don't think change is easy. But the way most people try to sort of help people change, right? And if you're just listening to this, I'm showing quotations. The way that most people try to help people change is by criticizing them, is by telling them that what they're doing is wrong. Oh, I'm going to help you change by giving you, true, ruthless, completely open feedback. Let me completely unload my honesty on you as to why everything you're doing is wrong and doesn't work. Well, it turns out feedback is not a great way to help people change. Feedback actually gets in the way. Feedback leads to shame, and shame leads to denial and defensiveness. So,
Howie, I want to that. I like that concept of because Howie, you hit the nail on the head when you say we're talking about change. We feel what we buck up against is when someone tells us we have to do it. It's that compulsion. Howie, you have to change. That gets your back up. So, how do we deal with that? So,
right. Well, the first thing to do is to not, impose our views on other people. And the way we think we can be helpful is by giving advice, or, by criticizing repeatedly or nagging, or something like motivating people like, boy, John, if you just did this, you'd be so much happier. And we know that just stokes the resistance. So the first thing you want to do is stop doing that. And instead, the first step of the 4 steps in our process is shift from critic to ally. So because people who are not able to change are stuck in a status quo where both the environment is supporting them not changing and their own habits are keeping them from changing, we need to shake things up. And one way to shake things up is all of a sudden to show up as an appreciative, empathetic ally with confidence in them. That already starts creating space where people can say, maybe there is something else that I could be doing.
Peter, pick up on that point, Peter, because I like that first step from a critic to ally. But so many of us, we have this feedback. I want to tell you this. So how do I tone it back? What's the process, Peter? So
we have a 3-part formula around this piece, which is to express empathy, to express confidence, and to ask for permission. In the end, it's going to be your choice, right? You could always say no. So I'm going to say, look, first of all, we have this thing called silver platter opportunities, which is a lot of times people come and they complain to us, right? They don't necessarily have an intent to change an action, but they're complaining to you. They're saying, I really can't stand such and such a person, or can you believe they said that, or they did that again, or I don't know what to do. Oftentimes, usually people are complaining about other people. So that's an opportunity for you to help them take accountability by just saying, wow, empathize. I get that that's hard. Wow, it sounds like it's really frustrating, and it sounds like you're, sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I can really feel that. I know, because I have seen you in other situations handle this kind of thing really well. Do you want to think about it together? Can we actually think about it? I'm happy to just listen to you complain, but I'm also happy to really think about it with you and see what we can do. And now we've gone from a victim to a collaborator. And, that's ultimately how we help create change is in a collaboration.
I like that, Howie, moving from victim to collaborator. In other words, you're giving me you're throwing me a rope, are you not? If I'm in the change process. So
yeah, and I'm telling you, you know what? In this world where we are so often lonely and alone, in a time when we're isolated in general, and in a moment where we're complaining is actually raising your hand and signaling, I feel alone. When I'm complaining about something, I'm doing it in order to connect with you, right? So if I complain about something, I want you to say, there, I get it. I'm with you. And wow, I can't believe that person's such a jerk. And then I don't feel alone. And what we're suggesting is, rather than respond the way our gut reaction respond, which is let me help you not feel alone, let me be with you by piling on with your complaint and reinforcing everything that you're thinking and further isolating you from the other people in your life. Rather than do that, I'm going to say, hey, I'm with you. I can see how hard that is. and I'm not leaving you alone. You want to think about a way to approach this productively together? And so now you're helping them not feel alone, but in a productive and a positive way, instead of an isolating and an alienating way.
Right. So good. Okay. There are 4 steps. So we did the first step, critic to ally. Step 2, Howie?
Mm-hmm. So the second step is to identify an energizing outcome. In other words, when people, the first thing you get when you get people permission, like, okay, John, you're going to let me help you. Great. Let's roll up our sleeves and solve this thing. Let's dive into the problem. Let's dive into why that person's a jerk. Let's dive into why you're procrastinating. And what that does, it's reinforcing the way you are already looking at it. And the breakthroughs are going to come from new insights, from new perspectives, from new interpretations. So we want to get you thinking positively. We want to get you excited, to give you some sort of energy to move towards something. So we say, let's focus on what's the energizing outcome that you want. So the problem is X, but what do you want instead? And what that does is it's just on a neurological basis, it shifts us from like avoiding predator mode to seeking opportunity. We're now looking for the berries and the roots and the fruits, the opportunities, as opposed to simply trying to get out of trouble, get out of pain, get away from a problem. And that allows our brains to operate at a much higher, more creative, more expansive level.
Right. And Peter, if I'm thinking as what Howie was saying about thinking of the outcome, the success, then is it a process of working backwards? If this is what I want, this is what I need to do to get there. So,
yeah. So that brings us to step 3, right? Step 3 is, what is the opportunity that is hidden in the problem? So you define an outcome. Let's say that my problem, I'm coming to you, I'm complaining that I've got a very difficult colleague, and she or he they keep interrupting me, and they keep interrupting meetings, and they make it very, very difficult for us to get anything done. Then the outcome might be, the problem is, right, I've got this difficult colleague. The opposite of that problem is I won't have that colleague anymore. There's 2 very, very easy ways to solve that problem. Fire the colleague if I can, quit, or do everything that I can to not work with them. Problem solved. Although there's no really interesting outcome there. So what's the outcome you want? I want amazing relationships with my colleagues where our disagreements lead to more powerful, productive results than we would have otherwise. Like, I want colleagues who I can engage productively in conflict with and come up with amazing outcomes. That's what I want. That's what excites me. Great. So now we still have the problem of this annoying colleague. So that's step 3, is we go back and go, well, how is that annoying colleague a hidden opportunity to get to that outcome? Right? So now I'm thinking, well, what I really want is like amazing colleagues that I could conflict productively with. Well, now let me see if this annoying colleague, who actually has very different views than me and approaches things very differently than me, well, that might be the perfect person I could have a productive conflictual relationship with. Let me see how I could begin to think through using her as an opportunity, or using them as an opportunity to create that kind of a relationship with my colleagues.
Well, we hear that what you just talked about, the annoying colleague or the colleague we know we need to get along with, but there's just that friction. How do you take the first step, Howie?
So in helping that person?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first step is to kind of model what we're doing in terms of an approach. So if I'm, if I want you, John, to talk to Sue Ann, one of the things I'm going to do is model coming to you as an ally, not a critic, and offering to talk it through with you and being empathetic. So kind of that energy is already beginning to offer another way for you to interact. But then we want, like, what's the outcome you want? And can you see, both for yourself and for the other person, a positive intent behind whatever, like, maybe you're very self-aware and you're like, I've been contributing to this conflict as well. They do that, I do this. We're both at fault. Well, it's an interesting place to start, but then can we translate that into positivity, a positive intent? When I criticize her, I'm really trying to get her to see, to make things better. When she interrupts, she's really concerned about the truth and that things aren't getting missed. Once you start shifting there, you can start saying, well, there are opportunities here for both of us to get what we want, for both of us to learn and grow that transcend, that get the outcome much better than just the knee-jerk ways we're doing it, the way I learned, the way it was conditioned into me. So one of the most profound things that I've gotten from working with Peter is his definition of change, which is a break from the past. So in order to change, we're going to have to break with other old ways of doing things. And this part of the beauty of this process is it really shows us, oh, I'm doing a thing just because I'm doing the thing, not because it's ever gotten me or will ever get me the outcome that I dearly cherish.
Oh, great. So that's a powerful thing. So in a way, if I hear you, so the first step is to lay your cards on the table and say, look, Peter, you and I, we're just not getting along, but how can we forge a way? Because you have stuff that you have good contributions. I think I have. So you're being honest with one another. Is that a good first step? So,
yeah, I mean, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm not against you, I'm with you. And I think, especially in this kind of a situation, sort of very, very quickly going from step one to step two, almost combining step one and step two to go, hey, can we talk about what we might create together? Like, I'm really excited about being in a relationship with someone like you where we're not annoyed by each other, but we actually push each other to be better. And we get into these conflicts, and I think we both, maybe I'm only speaking for myself, but I think we both leave kind of frustrated and stressed and maybe annoyed with each other. And I don't want that. And my greatest outcome, the hope that I have, I would love to have colleagues where I disagree and that disagreement becomes an incredibly productive way to get to a better outcome. Would you be in on exploring that with me? Can we think about together how we might get there? Would that interest you at all? And it's fine if it doesn't, but it would interest me. I mean, I have to be vulnerable to make that offer, to make that suggestion. I have to be willing to say that. But I'm kind of combining step one and step two. And I say, I'm your ally, and here's this thing I want. Do you want it also? And then we can begin to say, wow, let's find the opportunities to do that.
Great. And there's a step four, Howie?
Yeah, step four is the plan, which is to say we have the insight, we have rapport, we've found the outcome. Now, what is the person going to do on the ground? By when specifically to begin taking steps? And we realized that the most important thing about the plan is not that it's right or perfect. We don't want to put that kind of pressure because no one can guess what the future will hold. But that what we call a level 10 plan, which is when you ask the person that you're helping, how confident are you that you will follow through? They say 10 out of 10, right? Because now we've said it's an experiment. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to work. But if you take action, something will change. And if you are paying attention, if you're not mired in shame or defensiveness, which hopefully we've helped to get you out of, you will view whatever happens as data, and you'll be able to self-adjust, and you can come back to me and we can talk about it together.
Thank you. What is one of the beauties of your book, among many, is you have a clear four-step process, which is easy to describe. But then you get into what I'll call the minutiae, which is where human behavior exists. And it's like, how do you disarm someone's defensiveness and increase their confidence to act? So,
the process itself is geared to do exactly that. So I would say, I wouldn't say, here's the process and here's this added piece that reduces their defensiveness. If you approach someone as an ally instead of a critic, you're reducing their defensiveness. If you're looking at an outcome that's energizing and exciting instead of a problem that's dragging and infuriating, you're reducing their defensiveness and increasing their energy. If you're then finding opportunities in that problem to achieve that outcome, again, you're reducing, every step in this process reduces defensiveness and opens people to possibilities that that might excite them in their lives.
Great. Now let's take a little bit of a perspective where we are right now. Definitely the hybrid workplace is here. I think it's going to be here for a long time. Does this helping people change or whatever? Because we're more isolated, but some congregate sometimes, is that a plus or a minus for the change process? I could probably argue both propositions. Do you have a perspective, Howie?
I don't know if it's a plus or a minus, but it's certainly more important, because when we're just interacting by Slack or Zoom or email, we're losing a lot of human cues. So this is a process that explicitly draws upon human cues of empathy, of allyship. And, it's interesting because a lot of people have complained about the workplace as a place where relationships are toxic, where there's a lot of competition that's unnecessary, where they don't feel supported. And now we're in a place where so many people are longing to return, not to that workplace, but to a new one. To gosh, I miss people. I even miss that person whom I thought I would never want to see again.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's good or bad that this is, we have this tool now, but it feels extremely timely and relevant, because if the pandemic has been the problem, then using our 4 steps, the opportunity is, can we, as we return or as we navigate what the workplace looks like, can we create something better than we had before, where we're not just proximal, but intimate, where we're not just, staring at each other, but connecting.
Right. Peter, you work with the top of the house, and you have been doing so for decades. And you believe that this change process is integral to leadership. What prompts you to believe that and practice that?
You cannot lead without changing people. That's the definition of leadership. The definition of leadership is you're moving people from point A to point B. You're inspiring them. You can call it whatever you want, but ultimately, you can't get to the top of a company and lead people in a direction without shifting, changing, aligning, cohering, like whatever words you want to use, from point A to point B. That's where you're trying to grow the company. You're trying, whether you're a CFO becomes CEO and you're thinking about EBITDA and revenue, or whether you're a CHRO and you're thinking about culture. Like that's what leaders do. Like they try to change people. And it's interesting because I got an email from a leader who I've worked with who struggled with leadership in the past. And he said, I really don't like the name of your book. You can change other people. It just feels disrespectful. And it's not, we shouldn't be those kinds of people. And, my answer is that's partly why you struggle in your leadership, is because, you're uncomfortable with this idea. And I understand being uncomfortable with the idea because in an ideal world, everyone's just living their individual lives. But when we're coming together, aligned with purpose and focused to move in direction, then we have to become comfortable as leaders with the idea that our job is to help people change in ways that benefit them and the larger entity that they're in. We've got to become comfortable with it. And then we've got to become really skilled in it. We've got to become really skilled in doing it in a way that engages them.
I think the beauty of your book, and I'll throw this to you, Howie, is that I'm saying you're detoxifying the concept of change, because so often change means stop doing something and do something else, and it's not because I want to, but because I'm told to. So I think that's a critical concept. Would you agree with that, Howie?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And maybe we want to use a different word than change. So help people attain their potential, help people express and discover and manifest their gifts, right? So for me, a leader, and Peter, you taught me this the first week I worked for you in 1999, is an organization is a platform for talent, right? It's just to be a springboard. So leaders, as the servants of that organization, want to create a place where people can achieve and fulfill what they're meant to achieve and fulfill. And we live in a world where there are so many people who are isolated, and we can't grow our gifts in isolation. I'm a gardener. If you just grow corn, the raccoons knock it over. But if you have corn and beans and squash, the squash have like little pricklers on their leaves. The raccoons don't like to touch it. The beans fix the nitrogen from the air. Like, we grow our gifts in community. And one of the things that I really value about Peter's approach, that I've been doing it for so long, I think of it as my approach, even though I got it from Peter, is that this is a communal approach. It doesn't say other people can change themselves or you should just change yourself. It says we need each other.
Right. And that's I like the way you're elevating that, but I think it's head on. When you talk, you can change other people. You're hitting the nail on the head. And in a way, one of your things is how to avoid uncomfortable conversations. Well, this could be an uncomfortable conversation. So you nail it, Peter. So.
Yeah. I first of all, I want to say, like, Howie, I love you, and I love one of the joys of writing this book together is, it's a collaboration. It's really a connection of ideas, which is, by the way, what we're saying change should be, and it's and even like doing all these interviews with you are just super fun because I even though we've done a ton of them, I learn something new every time. Sorry, John, what was your question?
No, I was saying Howie was elevating the concept of change to this a platform for realizing your potential and what you guys do in your coaching process and all of that. So I think that you can liken this change, the fact that your title is dead on, because it might make people initially uncomfortable, but isn't that the point of avoiding these? You can't avoid conflict. You need to deal with it.
Yeah, 100%, John. And I, the book I wrote before this one is called Leading with Emotional Courage, the willingness to feel things in order to act. And the truth is, like, I don't want people to avoid uncomfortable conversations. If they do, they're really not going to get very far. Or they're going to shrink. They're going to become so small so that their size doesn't interfere with anyone else's perception. We become smaller when we're afraid of that. What I do want is to offer them skills in how to have the kinds of conversations that can be life-changing for them and for other people, so that even if the conversation makes them uncomfortable, they are equipped to go into it with success. And they become more and more comfortable over time with these conversations because they know how to do it. They know what to say. They know what not to say. They know how to engage in a difficult conversation in a way that predisposes a positive, productive result. And that's what excites me. I think let's be a little uncomfortable, but do it successfully so that our comfort zone continues to expand and increase.
Well, I think that's, again, one of the virtues of your book is that it's a methodology. And when, you're asking people to change or showing them, depending on what side you're on, but you're giving them a roadmap for them to, you're not throwing them off the boat. You're giving them a roadmap for how to proceed this. Howie, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah. So, we want to be inclusive. Like, one of the big, issues in the workplace is around diversity and inclusivity. And while not specifically about those initiatives, this is a way of connecting with people that weaves us together, that says we are both in this together. I can have it, for me to approach you, and I might not want to just sort of criticize you and yell at you, but for a lot of people, that's not very uncomfortable. That's kind of a go-to. But for me to come in and say, hey, I'm giving up control, right? Because it's all yours. It's always been yours. I've never had control. I'm just giving up the illusion of it. I want something that I need your help to get, or we need our help, each other's help to get. That, it can feel uncomfortable until the words are out of your mouth. Then it can become the most generative, comfortable, beautiful, weaving together conversation. So very often, like most things in life, the fear of the first 3 seconds is what stops us. And once we're in it, we're just in the flow and we're nourishing each other.
That's a good, and I think that's those initial, it's going to be really uncomfortable, but there's a way out of this. And that's what you guys have done. So, gentlemen, we are racing along. We could go for another hour on this, but I want to bring this to a close. So I ask all of our guests for a story of grace. Do either or both of you have a story you'd like to share with us? So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just sort of jump in and continue the conversation I started when I said I love you, Howie. Yeah, like we worked on this book really closely together for well over a year, and I like Howie kept refining my thinking around it, and we kept pivoting. And kept changing this and getting more clear about this, et cetera. And Howie, you showed such tremendous grace in, like, you could get frustrated, like my thinking wasn't so clear, and it was like an ideal collaborative relationship where my thinking was pushed, which made sort of more work for both of us. And you were, like, you just rolled with it. There was like tremendous grace in general and grace under pressure. So don't feel your need to reciprocate, like give your own story. It had nothing to do with me, but I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you, Peter. And, just reciprocating a bit, thinking back on our first drafts, they were terrible. And the only reason that we're at the point we are now is that your grace in receiving my terrible first drafts. Like, I never felt like, I don't want, I sent you something this morning for an article that we're working on. I said, this is awful, and it's fine, right? Because I know you're going to read it and you're going to like critique it, and and the way you do it is going to make me feel appreciated for the work I put in, rather than, it's obviously all wrong, and that's fine. So I really appreciate the freedom that gives me to produce good work, because if I was worried about producing good work, I would never write a word.
Yeah. It's a great story. I've had many stories about grace, but this is the first one really addressing between two collaborators. And obviously the proof is in the pudding, because you both have written a terrific book. and so that's the grace you showed one another produced something wonderful. So, gentlemen, how can we find you? So.
The best way, thank you, by the way, John, so much. The best way is bregmanpartners.com, BREGMANPARTNERS.com. And you can find out anything about the book and lots of other resources there.
Great. Howie Jacobson, Peter Bregman, it's been an honor to have you on the show. And with that, we'll close out.
Super fun. Thanks so much, John.